everyone, welcome back to the Art2Life podcast. I recently got this really great question from an artist in Texas. Her name's Lorinda Bourne, and she had this question around something that I've mentioned before, this idea of when we make our work more like ourselves, when our art becomes more personal, it actually doesn't become more odd or more disconnected from the world. We tend to think that, right? But it becomes more universal. It actually becomes more accessible. And this is so important to realize because I believe that this is, what I want you to get from this conversation here is the fact that it is so important to move towards this authenticity again and again and again, more and more and more in your work. Just because we can't see it out there, right? If we look at what Picasso has done or any artist we know of, it seems so personal, but we all know this person's work and it seems so doable and relatable. But when we see our own work, and it starts to becoming truly our unique, we don't recognize it almost in the world because it hasn't come out yet. So it feels scary to put it out there. And we think that it won't relate, that it won't be understood, that there's no place for this. It's such an odd thing. But as I said, quite the opposite is true. In fact, it's a business plan. So when an artist delves into their own personal experiences, emotions, and perspectives, they start to make work that's more authentic. And another word so I want to go over kind of 4 or 5 reasons or rationales as to why this occurs, how this happens, how when our work becomes more personal, it becomes more accessible or more desired. So the first of the 5 kind of points that I've been able to kind of sequester here has to do with authenticity. Another word, in a way, for authenticity is relatability. The more authentic your work is, the more relatable it becomes. When we express our art, and even if it's hard to make, even if there's struggle in it, when we share and all of that comes into the work, people can see themselves in it. They relate to it, and there's something that I talk a lot about in art making, that everyone is walking around the world wondering what's in it for them, whether they're looking at your art or whether they're looking to go to Disneyland or they're looking to buy a new product. We're kind of self-centered, which is good in a way. And so your art becomes a possibility for people. They're attracted to it, but there's something in it for them, and they're looking for that. So the more unique stuff, the more personal you can be in it, the more it will relate to certain people and land for them and connect them to the work. It helps to rise above what you're making and ponder that question. Well, what am I doing? I know what I'm doing for me, or I think I know what this feels like, but what will it feel like to others? Now, I'm not suggesting we make work for other people, but we want to consider the kind of get out of our own close-up detail sometimes to have a bigger view, a bigger picture. And that's a really great question. What's in it for them? I'm making this podcast today, and I love this subject. That's what's in it for me. And it's something that I've been trying to sort out, this whole idea around connection and making personal work and universal work and bigger work and all of that. That's interesting to me. But what's in it for you? And I need to think about that. And what's in it for you, what I'm hoping you're going to get out of this is maybe something that is said here will trigger you to step more forward in your art, to take more chances with it, to show more of yourselves, right? That's what's in this for you. And that makes for a better podcast, frankly. It makes for a better experience because we're in the world together, right? So, and people can feel that. People can feel, oh, I get it. This was helpful. I learned this from this podcast today, and I'm going to try this in my work. So everyone loves to feel seen and heard and felt. And your art does this for you, for sure. But it also does this for other people. When I'm making art for a show, the pattern of it, I have a date and I'm really excited. And then I start running out of time. then I have to start making the work. And I'm kind of scared, intimidated. And then I finally start and it feels a little better, but I struggle with it. The paintings take a long time. They're not that good. I doubt. There's frustration. And this goes on for way too long. And, I'm enjoying it, but I'm like, nothing's really happening yet. And then at a certain point, I get so scared and so frustrated, and clearly this way of holding on and so myopically focused on it, that I have to think beyond that. I have to think beyond that, and I just have to let go and have some freedom. Just out of frustration, I just kind of let go, and then suddenly some things start to fall into place, and it's a flow state. And I know kind of what I'm talking about. And you make these things, and they come out quicker and easier, and to the point where the last 2 weeks of making the work, like most of it happens in the last 2 weeks. And it's stronger and better. And I've leaned into I've just allowed my own intuition to come into this and just let it be personal. Just like, this is what it's going to be. And I'm just lean into that. So much so that I almost don't recognize myself in it. But I'm double downing on this idea of personal, of just not thinking about making it so people like it, not thinking for anything, I'm just trying to be courageous. And I finally just have to let go, because it can't be done. I can't make the work any other way. I have to just let go of all that. And then the last 2 weeks, I make this work. And literally sometimes when I go into the gallery, and I usually like it by the end. And sometimes I look at the work when I go to the show, and it's like, I don't even know how I made some of this. It was made in such a different way. It was made with this idea that I'm just fully trusting myself. I don't know if that lands for you or not, if you've experienced that before. And it's powerful. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I want to underscore the fact that leaning into personal work is really the way forward. I mean, it can speed up your career so much. It improves the quality of the work so much. Authenticity, making it personal, is how you connect with people. The second idea here, authenticity is the sort of the biggest idea, the most important here, but there's also emotional resonance. Art evokes resonance and genuine emotion. It connects with people on a deeper level. I mean, we can make a picture about a subject matter, but the way we present it, the way we make it, and how we feel when we're making it, even if it's a realistic work or whatever, conveys a certain kind of emotion. That kind of comes in with art. It's kind of amazing. there is no language barrier. Personal work, meaning work that matters to you, we want those feelings coming in. We really need them more and more and more. That will come through the work and reach out to viewers no matter where they're from, no matter what country they live in, no matter what language they speak. The language of emotions is universal. And our art is working on that level. That's why when it's personal, it's universal. That's why when we make work that's authentic, it lands in a really big way. I was involved in a startup business quite a few years back, and I made all these boxes actually, and I painted them, and they had images of my birds on them. And I wanted this box, this one in particular, is really beautiful. I wanted it to be like a keepsake box. I wanted someone to be given this box and to be like a gift and it had this beautiful robin on it, and it was really pale and white, and it was very nature-based, but I wanted it to feel like hopeful, like you would put things in here, treasures, right? And on the bottom of the box, inside, when you opened it up, I had this beautiful aqua color, and it's actually that Art2Life aqua color that we sell, Morocco blue, I think it's called. And it's one of my favorite colors. And the inside of this box was that color, but it was stained with this kind of golden quinacridone gold color. And it wasn't just raw aqua like a swimming pool. It was faded like duck egg blue, beautiful. It's one of my favorite colors. And in the bottom of the box, I had stamped with a little letterpress thing, with a little hammer, the word miracle. And I wanted the word miracle to be kind of second reading, like, whoa, what is that? When I hold it up to the light, it says miracle. I didn't want it to be, a sticker that said miracle. I wanted the miracle to be inside of the work. I wanted it to be under the surface a little bit, so someone would get this box and it was just something about this box, and then they would find it and discover it. So this was my idea. And it was, I'm trying to make this box, and we're trying to produce gajillions of these. And the only way you can do that, turns out, is to have a lot made at once. And I can't make all the boxes myself. So the partners we had were experts at getting factories to make this work, beautiful work. It's like where people, half the world's things, from Apple iPhones to pair jeans, are made in different places, and usually places that, are, there's a whole controversy around this, where, people are working for less money, and then this product is made inexpensively, and then it's sold for more. But that aside, I ended up going I couldn't communicate this idea of how to make this box. I tried to communicate. We had a factory, a company that was building these boxes, making these boxes for us, and I was trying to communicate to them through email and videos, kind of what I wanted. And they couldn't get it. I couldn't communicate the emotion I wanted to get. And it was an emotional thing that I was trying to communicate. So I went there. I flew to Shanghai, and I went to the factory. And when I say the factory, there wasn't like a bajillion people. It was a company that produced wooden trays and boxes. And there was about 15 people who were making this work. And there was a couple people that were helping them do it, kind of like the overseers of this thing. And I sat down with all of them. And I took out the paint, and I showed them how to paint, and I showed them how to make the finish. And then I tapped the words in, and I sanded it. And even though their English wasn't so good, and I couldn't speak their language, I was able to show them what I wanted and kind of show the emotion. And they all got it, right? Like, they understood the emotion, this sort of under the surface magical quality. And they were able to do it. But I had to do it in person, and there was no words could describe it. But they saw it, and when I stood in front of them and they felt it in me, it translated. So it's interesting, right? Like that's what's at play here. That's what comes through the work. We think we're just making something that's a personal thing for ourselves, but it's so important to understand what this thing feels like. It's important to know how we come off in a room. It's important to know, if we're wanting to be a certain way, if we're wanting to make something, it is important to understand how it's perceived in a way. It can derail you, and we don't want that. We want it mostly to come from ourselves. But understanding this aspect of this universality of things we make is important. The third idea why this phenomenon occurs is around archetypes. Storytelling is part of the human culture. It's always been this way. And there's been archetypes, are universal symbols and motifs and characters, that they evoke shared cultural and psychological meanings. We know this. I mean, Star Wars is this, right? It's a space movie. It's an adventure, but it's also about heroes and the hero's journey, right? And villains and all these characters and motifs are the same thing. And so, when artists share, their narratives, which is your art, you don't have to write words on it, but you unintentionally tap into these archetypal images and symbols, and they cross cultures and time, and that's what's going on. We sometimes don't even know it, but we are using them. It's in our DNA. We relate to heroes. We feel heroic. We think of the world this way. We tell stories. These are part of the world. And whether we know it or not, our work has this in it. I remember traveling around the world and, early on, and I was, before I left, I was more of a realistic painter. I was painting kind of like a Wayne Thiebaud-esque looking landscapes and still lifes. And even though I was doing illustration at the time, that was kind of the look and feel of my work. But by the time I spent a year traveling, and I went to all kinds of places all over the Southeast and Indonesia and India, and I was so amazed at this different cultures, but the motifs, the emotions were coming through. Those archetypes were present everywhere. It didn't matter where you went. And it got my wheels turning as to like, wow, if I could start using these, my work would become more and more universal, would become bigger than me, which I love that idea. The fact that I was just kind of doing decorative for myself, kind of and it was commercial art. I was taking a bank and making it look kind of like Wayne Thiebaud or Monet had painted it. And it was a little thin personally, but I wanted my work to become more than that. And I definitely started paying attention to these symbols and looking them up and realizing that when I make an infinity symbol, which is one of the marks I make all the time, it has meaning for me, but it also has meaning for other people. That's a mark, that's a shape, that's a symbol, numbers, numerology, all these things. 3 has a certain kind of meaning, right? It's not just a number. We have this happen in our work quite by accident. Or if we start paying attention, we can bring this in. We can bring these in, and it makes the work more meaningful. It connects with more people, a more diverse, wider audience. I made a painting years ago when I was in art school. And as I said, all my art was a kind of realistic work, and that's what I would do, whether I was painting people sitting on a pier in Santa Monica, or I would paint a dog the same way, or I would paint, anything kind of realistic, I would infuse it with color and loose paint. So it was about the paint, but it was still something that looked like something, and it was still of this world. But when you're in school, you're just kind of figuring things out. And I was definitely trying to figure things out. And I experimented one day, and I was just playing around, and I made this painting. I made it up. It was one of the first things I ever made up, actually. And it was a face, and it was lit beautifully. It was this orange light, and it was it was this face, but the head was. So it was kind of like made up, but the head was hollow. Like it was the half the head was missing, and it was like a bowl. It was like a face on a bowl, but it looked kind of realistic, and it was this face, and I knew how to paint faces and head painting, and so it had this really like Renaissance look, but it was this fantasy, almost imaginary head, and there was this rain that was falling into in this where this person was. It was like head and shoulders, and the rain was going inside the head. It was filling that up, and it was raining in this thing, and it was something about it was so stirring. And I remember it won some award, and it was such an outlier. It was just like I don't even know what this thing is. It's so weird. Called it the Hollow Head, it was the weirdest thing. It was so strange. But it got this award, and it was published, and I got so many comments about it, and so many people resonated with it. And they said that, they felt this way too. And I was like, I don't even know what you mean. What do you mean you felt like? What is it? And they're like, well, I'm just like, I'm like empty inside, and I'm needing to replenish. This was kind of some of the themes, and I kind of would look at it, and I started thinking about it, and it was really kind of about that in a way. And actually, when I looked back after kind of reflecting on it, I saw that this wasn't just some dumb experiment. I mean, that's where it came out of, but it was a self-portrait of my life. It was the most truthful thing I had painted probably up to that point in my life. And there was a vulnerability about it that I was still forming, and I felt empty inside, and I needed this. And it was like I was in this sort of season of my life, this winter of my life that I was needing to be filled up again. And I had tapped into unintentionally kind of an archetype, this sort of motif and these ideas that, man, it just landed for people. So sometimes we don't even know when it's so personal, but we're letting it out into the world, as embarrassing as it was. I would not have promoted that. I just inadvertently included it with some work. And when I entered my work, I wasn't going to show it in my portfolio because I didn't even know what kind of work I would get with it. It was so bizarre, And truth be told, that actually became the direction of my work. My illustration became completely made up. I ended up doing stylized, made up people and imagery, and I went entirely in that direction, But that was years before that. So it was really, really fascinating. So the fourth kind of idea is around just humanizing the experience, right? Personal art brings humanity into the experience for the viewer. So instead of an abstract concept, the offering is a piece of the artist themselves. Like the hollow head thing, like this, when you're doing this and you're going there and you're including more parts of yourself than ever before, even the parts maybe that you're not so proud of, right? Like all parts are needed, I believe that strong work, having insecurity is part of that, being tentative and not sure is a powerful thing to add into the work. especially when there's confidence, right? Those opposites. I talk a lot about differences. But doing this, sharing this experience, this humanity, bringing all of yourself, humanizing it, is hard to do, and it creates vulnerability, and that vulnerability is riveting. It is so connecting. It is a superpower if your work has that. If you're willing to put it in it, right? It leads to empathy, to connection. We think about this for ourselves, that I can't show my work until I have a gallery. I got to get my work so much better before I put it out there. And these are the reasons, right? We want to look all put together if we're going to show who we are. But the point is missed. It's much better to be showing the half starts, the missteps, the terrible beginnings, and owning it, sharing that vulnerability, because if you want a following, if you want to connect with people, which is what selling art is, and fans, and that is more of a steady, surefire way to do it. It's scarier, of course, but that vulnerability is so good to have, and be able to hold it in your art making. I sometimes feel that this is what art making is here to do for us. It's here to make things that we care so much about that it has to grow us in order to make them, because we care so much that it creates vulnerability. And there's a tendency to avoid that. But when we go forward, it's amazing. And then those breakthroughs occur and those connections occur. We just can't help falling in love when we hear someone's story, right? We can't help falling in love with that person. Story, which is an abbreviation of what your art is so absolutely connecting. Do you notice now when you watch the Olympics, the way the Olympics are produced? Sure, there's all these people from all over the world that are experts, that are the top of the class, world-class skateboarders, whatever, And it used to be that you would tune in and there they are, and they would do the event. And it was amazing, watching someone do these incredible dives or incredible downhill skiing. But a few years back, they figured out if they really wanted to connect more, to make the Olympics even more amazing, more connecting, that they needed to use story. So now, when we watch the Olympics, we don't just watch the 5 women downhill skiers. We go into produced stories about their lives, where they train, what's hard for them, how they broke down 4 years ago, and this is their last chance. How they got divorced, how they ski every morning, what all the things, they're human beings like we are. And when we feel connected to them, then we can understand what's at stake, right? We can really comprehend the effort given and the sheer will involved. That's what makes great art, right? And all of this can be put into your work. And of course, a great video, a story about who you are and why you're here and why you're making what you're making and what's hard about it and what you're trying to overcome is a compelling piece to your website portfolio. But in a way, this story, if you connect with it, if you understand it, if you can bring that into your art, it's going to be in there anyway. The art is it's not a movie. It's a single thing. It's a painting, it's a one-off. But that story is in there. This is why a culture, a world that lives on storytelling. This is how we learn. This is how communities come together around story. We come together around spiritual practices. They're all stories that we hold true, that we share, that we come together on. I mean, we're talking about art here, but we're talking about the larger world. What holds it together? What drives it? What's in it for them? The fifth point here is that your perspective, when you do share these unique stories and viewpoints, your point of view of how you paint a still life, or what you love about that wildlife scene, or that abstract work, or how the lines form, or how the colors come together. If it's yours, it will be unique. And if it's unique, it's going to draw a wider audience, because you're now part of this tapestry of human expression. You're enriching the collective tapestry of human expression. And we need these diverse perspectives and insights. These are insights that we can glean from your work. In a way, we can feel them into the human condition, into what it feels like to be a human being. If your work is personal, it draws a wider audience because of these different perspectives. That's what they're coming for. It's a shared aspect of the human experience. Art's powerful, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, but this is why it's powerful. Literally, because it can move us, it can teach us, it can inspire us, it can change our life, it can give us evidence of where we're going, all the things that the creative path that we get individually. But it has the ability to transcend cultural and individual differences. It literally can bring the world together, and it creates connections that go way beyond a specific context. That's the power of painting authentically, of making art authentically, of expressing yourself authentically, and why the stakes are so high, and it's so cool, because it's way bigger than us. And when I think about that and the impact that can cause, that's a pretty good reason to get out of bed in the morning. So anyway, I so appreciate the question, right? That's such a great, Lorinda asking that question, just to kind of dive into that, because I've kind of known this, but I had to spend some time really understanding, well, why is that? So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you go to the podcast at Art2Life, you click on podcast, there's a little yellow bar on the right-hand side where you can leave a comment or ask a question. I get a lot of ideas for this podcast from there, so it's super appreciated if you guys head on over there and leave a comment or a question there, and you can record it. And then I'll use your actual recording on the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. And again, if you have a friend or know someone who's interested in deepening and discovering who they are and who they are becoming through art, pass this podcast on. I'd so appreciate it. You guys, thanks for being here. I will talk to you next week on the Art2Life podcast. Okay, bye everyone.